Welcome to All of Well. I'm Dinah Krebs, your host. And on this podcast, we share inspiring stories of resilience and perseverance. Let's journey together to uncover the secrets to living life to the fullest, where we all live well. Hi, this is Diana Krebs with All of Well podcast, and I am here today with Jerry Rosenthul. He is the founder of Champion Mentorship. He's a keynote speaker, leadership trainer, executive coach, and best-selling author of Don't Let Doubt Take You Out. And so I'm super excited to hear from him because I know that he can really get a room going and excited. And so let's hear a little bit from Jerry.
Hi, Diana. Well, thank you. Welcome to your own show. Thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. It's I always love the opportunity to to share insights and stories and journeys that I've had in my life to help other people. That's what my whole life is about now, is about how can I take what I've been through, what I've experienced, what I've overcome, and allow that to help me help others go through challenges and overcome setbacks and get beyond obstacles in their own lives, whatever that might be. And so, my journey is very unique it's my own journey, but I started out in the network marketing profession probably, oh my goodness, 31 years ago, and didn't know anything about network marketing, didn't like networking, didn't really like marketing either. But I saw this business opportunity. I saw lots of people around me making lots of money and having freedom in their lives. And I thought, man, that's exactly what I want. So maybe this is the place that I should be. So I joined a financial services company in the network marketing profession, which was kind of profound because at the time that I did that, I think I was right around 25 years old. I was living in a 300 square foot guest house, which is basically the way of letting people know I have no money to pay rent. Can somebody give me one of their extra places to stay? So that's where I was living. I was $26,000 in credit card debt. I was borrowing money from my friends to put gas in my car to get around town. Now, the profoundness of that was here was this guy driving to your house to sit at your table and teach you how to manage your finances. So that's when I began to be introduced to my good friend doubt, because doubt started to really take over my mind, imposter syndrome, all of these crazy things. And at the end of the day, I had two options. We all have two options. Either I quit because I could ask myself, what were you thinking in the first place? Or I could persevere and say, somehow, some way, I'm going to make this happen. Well, lucky for me, I chose the latter of the two. And my journey was not easy. It was difficult. It was challenging. It took me many, many years to get rid of the mental cobwebs that had collected in my mind from all of my past experiences. But I worked through it, and I ended up building a very successful business out here in the desert. Ended up having a huge office, a 2,500 square foot office, which was a step up from my 300 square foot guest house I lived in, and was very, very successful at it. And through the process, met my son's mom, and we ended up getting married, and we spent 10 years side by side, 24 hours a day, building this business that we had. Well, 2003 came around, and that was the greatest moment of my life because that was the day that my son was born in April of 2003. And after that, we started going through some challenges. His mom and I just, why am I home? Why are you at work? I need some help, but I'm working so you can stay home. It was just a weird dynamic. So we spent 3 years going through counseling and, all that good stuff. And in 2006, we just decided to amicably separate in the summer and see maybe that will help us out. Well, when that happened, I started on a massive downward spiral. I went from having my son, who was now 3 years old, from every day of the week to now I only had him on the weekends. because I was working and his mom had him during the week. So I was losing time with him. I started going into this massive, massive state of depression. So when I talk to people and coach people that have experienced depression, they're talking to someone that they can relate to. I know what that's like. I always say depression's like a riptide. It'll grab hold of you and it just won't let go.
Right.
And as a byproduct of that, and my focus being everywhere, the business that I had invested with my son's mom, up to that point, it was 13 years, blood, sweat, and tears poured into that thing, just began to implode right in front of my eyes. And in September of that year, after everything we tried, my son's mom and I decided the best thing for us to do for our son was to get a divorce. And in November of that year, I found myself laying on the floor of my apartment, writing a letter to my son to explain to him when he got older why his dad took his own life. And it
It's
was
like the
one,
most emotional person.
that's okay. This is an emotional story. I feel everything as I share it again.
It is. That
It
is
was,
so, that's like, it's hard to hear. I'm sure it's hard to say. I'm sure it's
it
hard to
is.
think about.
It is, but there's a reason I share it, and that's what we're going to build towards.
Yeah.
I'm a man of faith, and I my life is, my life is all about putting God in the center. That's me personally, and so I know that in that moment, God saved my life that day because the plans He had for me were greater than the plans I could see for myself. And it was about 2 weeks later I started to ask myself some difficult questions. How did this happen? How did the guy who was the encourager, the motivator, the one that everyone came to for advice and for help, how'd that guy end up on the floor getting ready to end it all?
Right.
And what I began to realize was that that was the beginning of the work I was going to spend my life doing. And what I learned was this. When I was on the mountaintop, we're all there. Everything you touch turns to gold, right? You could do no wrong.
Right.
I was the master of my mindset. I really mastered my mindset, my thoughts, what I was doing. But when I was on the bottom of that mountain, in the valley, on the floor, my mindset mastered me. And specifically, what it was doubt. It was the doubts that I couldn't do it. I was a failure. What was I going to do now? I failed at my marriage. I failed at the business. The doubts from all of these other people that came against me that, you should never have done that. I told you that, blah, 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 blah. And I say this, but it's the truth. Doubt literally almost took me out because it was so loud in my mind. That's all I heard. And that's probably why I wrote my book that just got released last year. Don't let doubt take you out. And this is a book about some of the things that I've learned on that journey, the imposter syndrome I had to get beyond, I didn't have a purpose. How do I create a purpose to help me overcome those doubts? And so I learned some things along the way as I went through my journey and realizing how doubt is created and how I can manage the doubts so they don't have to manage me. I can overcome the fear and not be overcome by fear. And so as I learned all of this stuff, it began to be a platform when I started working with people within the network marketing profession, because that's what I knew. All of a sudden, all of these things that I just experienced were now making life-altering changes in other people's lives as we addressed their doubts and their limiting beliefs and their fears and their uncertainties and all of these things that they were dealing with. I was now watching my test turn into my testimony and other people's. I was looking at my mess and it became my message. And so I've spent the last 12 years of my life. I started my coaching business, Champion Mentorship, back in 2012. And at that point, after after I got up off that floor, so that was 13 years of building my network marketing business. I spent the next 5 years after that just kind of wondering what was next. I didn't have the desire or the passion to go back and build the business. I saw my son's mom everywhere. It was kind of like the difficult time when you lose a spouse that you've been with forever and trying to live in the house that you once shared together. It's so difficult. And the same premise applied to the business. I just didn't have the passion to go back and build it again because I had done it. And it was just too much. It was too raw for me. And so I spent 5 years just kind of, okay, God, what next? What am I going to do? This is what I thought I was going to do with my life. Now it's not. And through those years, I went through lots of training. I went through lots of growth. I went through lots of just understanding of my own mindset. And then in 2012, a friend of mine came to me and asked me if I thought about doing coaching. And I told her, nope. And she says, well, you got to do it. You got a gift. And she invited me to come speak at a meeting. There were 30 people there. She asked me to do an introductory coaching session with people, $20 for 45 minutes. So out of that, half those people signed up for this introductory coaching session, of which I had no clue what in God's name I was going to talk about with these people. So I just kind of came up with something from my own experience, shared it with them. And then 8 of those 10 people initially signed up for a 6-month coaching program. Now, you have to understand this. I had no trainings, no materials, no courses, no books, no live events. I had no clue. I didn't know what I was doing. But yet 8 people just signed up for 6 months of coaching, not knowing that I had no clue what I was about to get myself into. And all I basically did was 1 week at a time. I came up with something. Why don't you go out and see how this works? And they'd come back. Well, that didn't work very well. Okay, great. Scrap that off the list. We're not going to do that again. Or they'd say, well, that went great. Oh, wow, I got a winner there. And just literally week after week, step by step, all of this stuff started to come to me. And I realized something so important that many people need to understand. The 18 years that I had spent in my own network marketing business was the training ground that prepared me for the next season of my life that God had for me. And once I connected those dots, I started pulling things from all of my past experiences and little by little pieced together a coaching program that turned into a live champion summit event that I've literally traveled all over the world doing events called the Mindset of Leadership. Now I get to be a keynote speaker for different companies when they need speakers. I get to go into businesses and train some of their teams on leadership and communication and working through these mental blocks that are holding them back from being successful. And that keeps the company from a profitable growth scenario, because when you're bound by your negative stuff in your mind, it affects what you do, it affects the bottom line.
Right.
And so when I help people free that up, it not only helps them grow, but it helps companies' bottom lines increase because people are more confident, they're doing better things. And so that's what I do now in my life, is take those experiences and go out and help as many people, companies, and businesses as I possibly can.
Right, right. I do some teen empowerment, and I have 2 teenagers, and if I could tell them all the time that these hard moments are just teaching you something, like it's your path for a reason. And if
Yeah.
you take these experiences and know that they're growing you for whatever reason, it will show one day. It will. Just believe that. Just believe that you're just having to get stronger, learn a lesson. There's a reason. You're on a path. It's
Yeah.
okay. It'll
Yeah.
be
100%. 100%. That just, I always say that challenges are just opportunities in disguise.
okay. Yeah.
And it's really, when we have difficulties in our life, I teach this to people all the time. We can't control lots of the things that happen in our life. They're really out of our control.
Yeah.
But the only thing we do control is how are we going to respond to those things? How are we going to react to those things? What are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
That's all about our mindset. It's all about how we think, how we act. I can't control negative circumstances that happened to me that weren't my fault, but how am I going to respond to that? People say to me, "Well, I just, I'm frustrated." And I said, and I'll tell them, I understand how you feel, but understand that you're choosing to be frustrated. Nobody told you you had to be frustrated over this. Is it frustrating? Yes. Do you have to be frustrated? No, it's a choice. You can try. I'm not saying you're happy in difficult times, but you can choose to say, I'm not going to allow this to affect my thinking, affect my joy, affect my peace, and take me out. This is a frustrating situation I have no control over, but I'm going to do the best I can to deal with it and get past it without having to get sucked into that vortex of being frustrated and discouraged. And then you walk around and that's how you are, and that's how you act, and that's how you speak. And then you wonder why nobody wants to join your team, why nobody wants to do business with you, because you portray what you're feeling inside. Whatever's inside comes out. And so you have to watch that trap. You have to just watch that trap. And I've been very good in my life. Am I perfect? Far from it. But I've learned how to handle those situations and to take a breather. And I've learned how to respond to things and not react to things. And there's a huge difference. People will just react. I
Right.
just take a breath and I'll say, let me just process this. And then I'll respond when I can be a little more calm.
Right. It's taken me a long time. I'm Greek, so we come from a family of yellers, and to not respond that way has been one of the most challenging things for me, to not yell, not freak out, overreact. That's just the environment I was raised in. I mean, God bless my parents. They did what they had to work with, raised us, but it is challenging to just not react and to take a minute. And now I even tell myself that, but mostly I just try to tell people, like, just, you're on the path. It's okay, you know?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
and
100%.
sometimes those challenging people and moments come in your life, right? Because they're teaching you something. They're there for a reason. They're not there, to destroy you. They're there for a reason.
Without a
What
doubt.
what would you say to your son right now? Um, like, why you got off the floor? That moment when you were at your lowest.
Mhm.
What was the one thing that picked you up and got you off the floor, back onto your 2 feet?
Well, my son is going to be 21 now in April, and
Oh,
he knows
exciting.
he knows the story.
Yeah.
He's heard the story many, many times. And what got me back off the floor, besides besides God knowing that, hey, there's something else you got that I have for you, besides that being the main thing, what really got me off the floor was I remember a moment when I was writing this letter to my son. Um, and I went into an unbelievable rage. I started throwing things, breaking things on the wall, screaming, yelling, crying. I mean, just all these raw emotions. And in that moment of letting out what was built up inside of me, the one thought that came to my mind: what is your son's life going to be like without his dad? Who's going to guide him? Who's going to direct him? Who's going to help him become the man he's supposed to be? And that was when everything just snapped for me. And that's when I just realized I can't go through with this, because my son's going to need his dad.
Yeah.
And that was that moment. And one of the most beautiful things that happened is when my son was 6, we started going on these annual father-son trips to San Diego for a week. We went to Legoland, we went to SeaWorld, all that stuff. became an annual tradition. We went on this week-long trip to the same place every year from the time Josh was 6 to the time Josh was 18, 19. So we're talking about 13 years. And the last time we went on this vacation, we were sitting at SeaWorld. We were having lunch. And we were just talking about how much fun we had had on this trip. As he gets older, it just becomes different. You can talk differently and you share different things.
Right.
And I'll never forget this, that he just said, Dad, I just want to tell you something. And I said, sure. What, bud? Thank you. I said, oh, hey, I love this trip. He says, no. I'm not talking about the trip. He says, thank you for getting off that floor. No amount of money can pay for
I
that.
want to talk, but I don't know I can't.
No amount of money can pay for that.
And not just your son. Think about all the people you have helped through the years.
I get lots of
Right?
letters from
If you
people.
didn't get off that floor.
Yeah, well, I get letters from people that will send me stuff when, the things I teach them have helped them, and they'll say the same thing. I'm so grateful that you didn't go through with it. I'm so grateful that you got off that floor. And I see my life now being that example to people that no matter how difficult it is, you can still pick yourself up and make something happen again. And that's not easy, but it's worth it.
Can we go back to your faith really quickly? Like, what have you always believed in God? Have you always had this higher power? And what would you tell somebody who's looking for some sort of spirituality? Like, how do people find that if they don't have that in their life?
I'm glad you asked that. I'm a minister, if people can't figure that out by the way I talk. And it's a funny story because I grew up in a Jewish household. Okay, I'm Jewish by heritage. My parents are both Jewish. And it was always funny that we were Jewish.
Yeah.
Never went to synagogue, never went to temple, never really practiced the Judaism.
Right.
So yeah, I grew up, but we weren't religious or
Yeah.
anything like that. We were the Jewish family that had a full-blown 6-foot Christmas tree in our house. And when my dad's Jewish friends would come over, and my dad's name was Saul, and they would say, Saul, what's with the Christmas tree? He says, oh, that's not a Christmas tree, that's a Hanukkah bush. And so we had the largest Hanukkah bush on the street for years and years.
Yeah.
But so I was never really much into that. I always had a belief that God was there with me.
Right.
Never really, determined that until I got older. And one day, one of my best friends who's now in heaven was talking to me about coming to church, the church that I've been at now for 17 years. And I told him, well, I don't do church, and we're Jewish, and that's what I was taught when I grew up, but I didn't understand why. It's just I was accepting something that was taught to me without having any knowledge of why am I supposed to believe this? I don't even know. So on that, when I got up off that floor, the first call I made was to my buddy Sid. And I didn't tell him what had happened. I didn't tell him the experience I went through. I said, Sid, when's church next? And he said, this coming Sunday. I said, I'll be there with you. And what I've learned is that sometimes God tries to reach us, but we're so oblivious to what's going on that the only way that he can reach us for the plans he has for us is to get us to the end of ourselves. On that floor, I came to the end of myself. And it was almost like I could hear God saying, finally, now we can do some work on you. And I went to church that next Sunday, and I gave my life to the Lord. And I didn't know what that meant, but what I knew was this. I had lived all those years without God in the center of my life. and look at where it got me. And so living my life with God in the center of my life couldn't be any worse. And so I gave my life to the Lord that day, not even really truly understanding the depths of what that meant. And that's taken me on a journey for the last 17 years that literally changed my life and helped me become the man I am, the father I am, the leader I am, the coach I am. I am nothing without God in my life. And I just tell people that having a spiritual journey is a personal journey. It's not something someone can force you into. It's not something that somebody can say, hey, well, you should believe this. No, no, no. Whatever someone's spiritual path is, it has to be a personal journey that they take on their own. Now, Sid didn't force me on a journey. He just invited me to come to church. And when I went to church, I felt the presence of God in that place, in my spirit, and Sid didn't have to do anything. It was already done. So I just tell people, I talk about my faith all the time. And I let people know, listen, my faith is a part of who I am. It's a part of my journey. And I'm not going to shy away from talking about my faith, but I talk about it in the context of my story. I don't talk about it in that I'm trying to convince everybody else that this is what you should do, what you need to do. You got to make that journey on your own like I did. But I will never not talk about my faith, because without that, I'd be gone. I wouldn't be here right now. And so it's everything to me. It's the centerpiece of my life. Everything I do is centered around that.
Yeah. Yeah. What if you were remembered for only one thing on this earth, what would it be? What would you want it to be?
Wow. Dan, that's a deep question. What would I want that to be? So if people are at my funeral and they're giving eulogies, what would I want them to say about me?
Yes.
I would want them to say, he gave everything he had to everyone he loved. He left it all on the field. He overcame. He had integrity. He was honest. He was passionate about his life and what he did. He made an impact in so many people's lives. He left the world a better place than when he came into it. And what the enemy meant for evil, God turned around and used it for his good. And that's what I hope people will say here. When I get to heaven one day, all I care about is hearing God say, well done, my good and faithful servant. Not, Jerry, what'd you do with your life? Well,
Yeah.
what'd you do? I gave you all these gifts. What'd you do? I want to hear, well done, my good and faithful servant.
Right.
That's what I want to hear.
I felt a lot of emotions in this, just speaking to you right now. So you definitely have um, an impact on
Thank
on
you.
people.
I'm
I
trying.
think my eyes are like, like
They look
they've
fine.
been tearing throughout this interview. I definitely, you know, think about myself too in some of this. And um, what's the one thing in your book? Don't let doubt take you out. What's the one piece of advice from your book that you would want to give to people? I know there's probably a lot in there, but just the one
Yeah,
that
I'm
really,
thinking, okay, the one thing I'd want to give people from my book, one of the easiest ways to open the door of your mind for doubt to just walk right in there is when you play the comparison game. And when you start comparing yourself and your journey with somebody else's, doubt will creep into your mind like nobody's business. And I tell people, the only person you should compare yourself to is the person that's looking back at you in the mirror. Because when you compare yourself to other people, you become bitter. When you compare yourself to yourself, you actually become better. And I talk to more people that have doubt-filled minds. That comparison is at the center of it all. You know, Facebook is a highlight reel. It's not real life.
Right.
And you can get on there and be having a horrible time in your business, and yet everybody's posting how great everything's going in their life. And all of a sudden, as you're reading and scrolling, doubt just flies right in. See what I tell you, Jerry? You're not as good as them. You're not as talented as them. You're not as smart as them. You don't have what it takes. What are you doing? This isn't for you. Maybe you need to go back to your job. That's what it is. It's that doubtful thoughts that come into our mind when you compare yourself to everyone around you. I'm comparing my house to my neighbors, my car to my friends, my body to this, my friend's body. I'm comparing my bank account to this bank account. How many letters do you have after your name? I mean, whether we want to admit it or not,
Yeah.
there's always this comparison going on in our lives with everything, but it's the way we allow doubt to creep into our minds is when we compare ourselves. So I just tell people, you got to put your blinders on and be like the horses. When jockeys put blinders on their horses, it's because they don't want the horse to pay attention to anything going on either side of them. Their job is they want their horse focused on where they're going.
Yeah.
That's how we need to live our life. Stop comparing yourself to everything that's around you. Put your blinders on and just work on yourself and get better every day. And one day, guess what? People will be comparing themselves to you.
Yeah. That's hard to do. You even see that just in the neighborhood. Like someone buys a new car, and then the next thing you know, someone else is buying, like everyone's buying new cars. And do you need a new car? You know what I mean? Like, do you really need a new car? Like, what is that going to do um, for you?
Yeah,
Even just seeing somebody at a red light, it's like, listen, you
yeah,
don't know these people. They're never going to know you.
right. And
But
then doubt turns into anger, and anger turns into frustration, and frustration turns into disappointment and discouragement. And all of a sudden, we're on this hamster wheel of negative emotions that
right,
all started with doubt coming into our mind and saying, hey, look at them. They're not even as good a person as you, and they've got more than you. Look at
yeah.
that. You're like,
Your book is literally for everybody,
it really is.
not just somebody trying to make success, like
No.
everybody.
This is what I consider to be a life book for because here's the thing. Everybody, I don't care who you are. This is one of the things I talk about in the book. Doubt doesn't discriminate. Doubt doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care how big your house is, your bank account. It doesn't care about anything. If you've got a brain, guess what? Doubt can creep in. And we
Right.
all deal with doubt on a regular basis. In fact, anytime I do an event, virtually or in person, I'll ask the audience, if you've dealt with doubt in any capacity in the last 30 days, raise your hand. Everyone's hand goes up, right? If you
Right.
dealt with
Like
doubt in the last
yesterday.
week, raise your hand. And
Right.
all hands go up. So we all deal with it. But the goal is not how do I get rid of doubt? Because you won't. It's always going to follow you the rest of your life.
Hmm.
The idea is how do I manage it so it doesn't manage me anymore? And that's what the book's about. That's what my journey's about. I have doubts all the time, but I've learned through some strategies that I teach in the book how to manage them so they don't manage me and affect me and stop me from doing the things that I need to do. And it's important for people to learn this in the world we live in today.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts or anything that you would like to?
I would just say to anyone that's listening, um, don't listen to people more jacked up than you are. Don't take advice from people that are more messed up than you are. Learn from people that are better than you. Learn from people that have gone farther than you. Let them stretch you. Be careful who you get your advice from. I tell people that all the time. be careful who your advice comes from. My dad built a very successful business. He came to this country with no money in his pocket from Argentina, and he built an incredible drapery business. It was just him, and very successful, was known all over LA, Southern California. He was called the King of Drapes. I mean, built a huge business.
Yeah.
When I got into network marketing, my dad lost his mind, called me all sorts of, what are you, dumb? Are you stupid? What, you know this? I thought you were smarter, da, 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 da.
Yeah.
And I had a decision to make. Was I going to listen to my dad and make him happy, or was I going to follow my heart and make him proud? And what I realized was my dad had built a business, very successful business, but his business and the network marketing business were completely different. He didn't understand the dynamics of the network marketing business. So even though I loved my dad, he was my best friend, he was my hero. When it came to that business, I took no business advice from him because he didn't understand it. I
Right.
went to people who had won in that profession and said, teach me, help me, guide me, coach me. And so even if my own father, I did not take advice from him because he didn't understand the kind of business that network marketing was. So I was getting advice that was just not correct, even if it was my father. So careful who you take your advice from, and always talk to people who are a step ahead of you. Talk to someone that's where you are so that they can help you get to that place. And that's one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given when I was going off that floor on my journey, was careful who you listen to and who you take advice from.
Right. Well, thank God, because that journey and that road that you stayed on, like, is now turned into changing lives for so many other people.
Right. Right. And I'm grateful for that. And every day I'm blessed to do it. It's just truly a blessing to me that every day I get a chance to take my life that was jacked up and use that. And I have a saying in my business, and it's kind of what my whole philosophy is. And it is, my changed life is meant to change lives. And that's my whole mentality. My changed life is meant to change lives.
My
And that's
changed
what I do
life is
every day.
meant to change lives. I
Yep.
love it.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Your story is
Well,
so powerful, and
thank you.
I absolutely enjoyed this conversation.
So did I. I appreciate you giving me the honor and the privilege of being on your podcast. I really do.
I absolutely appreciate you being here, and I think that when people listen to this, they're really going to rethink all of that doubt that they have in their life.
Absolutely. And if people are listening to this and they want to reach out to me, maybe they have some questions, or maybe they're in a company that is looking for a speaker to come in, a trainer, whatever. They can check out my website at championmentorship.com, and there's all sorts of information on the website for them to look at. And then there's a contact button up there. If you just hit the contact button, you can send an email, and I'll personally respond to every email that I get. So if you have any questions or like to know about, my speaking schedule or training or anything of that nature, go to championmentorship.com, reach out to me through there, and I'd love to connect with some of you and see what I could do to bring value to your life and your business.
Perfect. Thank you, Jerry. I really appreciate
Thank
talking
you,
to
my
you.
friend. Great to be here.